The first deficiency I found at Harwick Mill was a fire door on the second floor that didn't latch. It was a Monday in early November, one of those Portland mornings where the fog off Casco Bay sits on the waterfront and makes every building look like it's dissolving at the edges. Harwick Mill stood at the end of Forge Street, 5 stories of red brick and arched windows, the kind of industrial architecture that architects call adaptive reuse potential, and everyone else calls a money pit. Caraway Development had bought it in 2021, gutted it, and spent 3 years turning it into 42 residential loft units, with exposed brick, timber ceilings, and river views that would justify the rent. My job was to make sure the building wouldn't kill anyone. I'm a building inspector for the city of Portland. I'd been on the job for 3 years, the last 8 months in Maine after transferring from Hartford, when my partner, Nadia, took the project coordinator position at Caraway. That timing was a detail I'd disclosed to my supervisor, Dennis Gage, when the Harwick Mill assignment came through. He said it wasn't a conflict of interest as long as I inspected to standard, which I intended to do. Nadia coordinated the renovation schedule and contractor logistics. I verified code compliance. Our jobs overlapped on paper, but not in practice. The fire door was on the second floor, corridor side, separating the residential wing from the stairwell. It was a 60-minute rated steel door in a properly rated frame, but the latch bolt wasn't engaging the strike plate. I tested it 3 times, pulled the door closed, and checked the bolt. Each time, the bolt extended, but missed the strike by about 1/8 of an inch. The frame had settled, or the door had been hung wrong, or the strike plate needed to be shimmed. Basic hardware correction. I marked it in my field notes. Fail. Unit 2C corridor fire separation door. Latch bolt does not engage strike. Requires hardware adjustment or strike relocation. I found 5 more deficiencies on floors 1 and 2 that morning. A smoke detector missing from the hallway ceiling on the first floor. The mounting bracket was there. The wiring was there, but the detector wasn't installed. An egress window in Unit 1A that had been painted shut during finishing. The sash wouldn't budge. A running toilet in Unit 2B with a flapper valve that didn't seat. An improperly labeled electrical panel in the first floor utility room. A stairwell handrail on the second floor with a loose mounting bracket. 6 deficiencies on 2 floors was not alarming. For a renovation of this scale, in a building this old, it was within normal range. I documented each one, handwritten field notes on the inspection pad I carried, plus photos on my phone, and transferred the findings to the digital inspection form on my tablet at the end of the day. I filed the report through the city's portal at 4:30 p.m. and drove home. Nadia was making pasta when I got to the apartment. She asked about the inspection the way she asked about any workday, casually, with the half-attention of someone managing her own mental load. How was the mill? Good building. 6 deficiencies on the first 2 floors. Nothing structural. Hardware and finish stuff. Tony will fix them fast. He's got the crew on standby for punch list. I know. It's standard. We ate dinner. She told me about a zoning issue with a different Caraway project. I told her about a colleague who'd failed a restaurant kitchen for the 3rd time. Normal evening. Normal life. The building was a job, not a story yet. I arrived at Harwick Mill at 8:15 Tuesday morning with my inspection pad and a coffee from the place on Congress Street. The fog was thinner today, and the building looked solid and handsome in the gray light, the kind of structure that makes you understand why developers covet old mills. The bones are good. The brick has character. You can feel the weight of the thing, the permanence. I started on the second floor, intending to re-inspect yesterday's deficiencies, before moving to floor 3. I walked to the corridor fire door outside Unit 2C and pulled it closed. The latch engaged. Clean, firm, the bolt sliding into the strike plate with the decisive click of properly aligned hardware. I tested it 4 times. Perfect every time. I crouched and looked at the strike plate. It was in the same position as yesterday. I'd photographed it, and I compared the photo on my phone to the current installation. Same screw holes, same plate, same position. But the bolt was engaging now, as if the door had shifted back, or the plate had moved, or the tolerance had corrected itself overnight. Doors don't correct themselves. I checked the first floor smoke detector. Installed. Mounted on the bracket, wired, indicator light blinking green. I hadn't noted the model yesterday because the detector hadn't been there. I noted it now. A first alert SA303CN. I pulled out my phone and searched the model number. Discontinued in 2011. A 13-year-old smoke detector in a brand new installation. Not impossible. Contractors sometimes use old stock, but unusual and not something I'd expect in a high-end renovation where the fire suppression package was specified by an engineering firm. The egress window in Unit 1A opened freely. I examined the sash and the frame. No paint residue. No scraping marks. No evidence that the window had ever been sealed. The paint on the frame was smooth and continuous, as if the window had always operated normally. The running toilet in Unit 2B was silent. The electrical panel was labeled. The handrail bracket was tight. Every deficiency I'd documented yesterday was corrected. I called Tony Valterra. Tony, did your crew come through Harwick last night? Punch list corrections on floors 1 and 2? Negative. My guys are on the Bramhall project all week. I'm not sending anyone to Harwick until you finish the inspection and give me the deficiency list. You haven't been on site since last week? Last Wednesday. We buttoned up and cleared out so you could do your walk. Why? Is there a problem? No problem. Just confirming. I hung up and stood in the first floor hallway and looked at the smoke detector blinking on the ceiling. Then I opened my tablet and pulled up the inspection report I'd filed yesterday. The report showed all 6 items as pass. No deficiencies documented. No failures noted. Each field I'd marked as fail in my submission was recorded as pass in the filed version, with my inspector ID, my timestamp, my digital signature. I opened my truck and pulled out my inspection pad, the physical field notes, handwritten, in my handwriting, on the carbon copy pad I'd used for 3 years. The top sheet for yesterday's inspection was clear. 6 failures, 6 descriptions, 6 locations, in ink, unaltered. The digital report and my field notes contradicted each other. One of them was wrong. I knew which one, because I'd written the field notes with my own hand. But the digital report carried my credentials and my signature, and the building now matched the digital report's version of reality. I sat in my truck for a while. Then I drove back to the office and asked to see Lena Cho. Lena was in the records room, which at the Portland Building Department was a repurposed supply closet with 2 filing cabinets and a laptop on a folding table. She was efficient, detail-oriented, and had the specific personality type that thrives on catching discrepancies. A records clerk who treated inconsistencies the way a terrier treats a squeaky toy. "Can you pull my Harwick Mill report from yesterday? I want to check something." She pulled it up on her screen. I looked over her shoulder. Pass on every item. My inspector ID. My timestamp. "Do you have the raw submission log? The system should show what was uploaded versus what's stored." Lena typed for a moment. "The upload log and the stored file are identical. No edits, no version history, no modification timestamp. According to the system, this is the original submission." It's not. My field notes show 6 failures. She looked at me. "Do you want me to flag it? I'd have to notify Dennis." I thought about this. Dennis Gage would interpret a discrepancy between my field notes and the filed report as either a system error or an inspector error. Either way, it would slow the project and generate paperwork, and the deficiencies were corrected. The building, right now, passed on the items in question. Flagging a discrepancy on items that currently met code would look like I was manufacturing problems. "Hold off for now," I said. "Let me do another site visit." I went back to Harwick Mill that afternoon and inspected floor 3. I found 4 deficiencies. The most significant was a fire separation wall between units 3A and 3B. Specifically, the drywall assembly at the ceiling line. The drywall had not been carried to the underside of the structural deck above. There was a gap of approximately 2 inches running the full width of the wall, visible from inside Unit 3A if you stood on a stepladder and looked up. Daylight from the neighboring unit was visible through the gap. This was not a minor finish item. A fire separation wall is rated for its ability to contain fire and smoke between units for a specified duration. A gap at the ceiling violates the assembly's integrity. It fails, unambiguously. I photographed it from 3 angles. I noted the dimensions. I wrote in my field notes: "Fail, critical, fire separation wall, Units 3A, 3B. Drywall not carried to deck. Gap approx. 2. Continuous. Assembly integrity compromised. Requires correction and reinspection before this unit can be certified. I also documented 3 minor deficiencies: a GFI outlet in the Unit 3C kitchen that didn't trip when tested, a missing threshold seal on a hallway fire door, and a bathroom exhaust fan that wasn't connected to the ductwork. I filed the report from my tablet while sitting in the hallway, watching the digital form populate with my field notes. I watched each entry appear on the screen. I verified each fail designation before submitting. I took a screenshot of the completed form before it uploaded. Then I drove home and didn't tell Nadia anything, because I didn't know what to tell her. Wednesday morning, floor 3. I went directly to the fire separation wall between 3A and 3B. I brought the stepladder from my truck and positioned it in Unit 3A and climbed up and looked at the ceiling. The gap was sealed, drywall, taped, mudded, and painted, running continuously from the top of the wall to the underside of the structural deck. No gap, no daylight. The joint compound was dry and slightly dusty, not fresh, not wet, not recently applied. The paint matched the surrounding wall surface in color and sheen. The work looked like it had been there since the renovation was completed. I ran my hand along the joint. Smooth, continuous, fully cured compound. This was not an overnight repair. Drywall mud takes 24 hours to cure fully, longer in cold conditions. This compound had been dry for days, minimum. I had photographed a 2-inch gap in this exact location 16 hours ago. The photographs were on my phone. I held the phone up next to the wall and compared. The angle was the same, the surrounding surfaces were the same, but where the photo showed open air and light from the neighboring unit, the wall now showed a seamless, aged drywall assembly. I checked my filed report on the tablet. The fire separation wall was marked pass. The GFI outlet, pass. The threshold seal, pass. The exhaust fan, pass. I checked my screenshot, the one I'd taken before submitting. The screenshot showed the report as I'd written it, fail on all 4 items. The field notes in my truck confirmed the same. Something was changing the reports after submission and before they reached the system, and the building was changing to match them. Or the building was changing first, and the reports were updating to reflect the new reality. I couldn't determine the sequence because I wasn't present when the changes occurred. I stood on the stepladder in Unit 3A and pressed my palm flat against the wall where the gap had been. The wall was solid, warm, not room temperature warm, warmer than that, as if something behind the drywall was generating heat. I held my hand there for a few seconds and felt, through the gypsum and the compound, a faint vibration, rhythmic, regular, like a pulse. I took my hand away and climbed down. That afternoon, Lena called. "Caleb, I'm processing your Floor 3 report. The filed version shows all items pass, but your field notes, you submitted the carbon copies to me this morning, show 4 failures, including a critical on the fire separation wall." I know. Which version is correct? The field notes are what I observed during inspection. The filed report does not reflect my observations. Lena was quiet for a moment. I have to flag this. You know that. I know. Dennis will see it by end of day. Okay. I hung up and sat in the hallway of Harwick Mill and listened to the building. The renovation was complete, which meant the systems were running. HVAC, plumbing, electrical. A building in operation makes sound. I could hear the boiler, the ventilation, the hum of the electrical panels, normal sounds, infrastructure sounds. Beneath them, if I listened carefully, something else. A low, pervasive vibration that didn't correspond to any mechanical system I could identify. It was in the timber framing, the heavy beams that ran through the building, original 1891 construction, exposed in the ceilings as an architectural feature. The vibration moved through them the way sound moves through a tuning fork. Not a rattle, not a hum, a resonance. As if the building's structure was remembering a frequency it had carried for 100 years. Looms. Textile looms, bolted to the floors, driving their shuttles through the warp threads hour after hour, day after day, year after year. The building had been built to contain and transmit that vibration. It was engineered for it. The timber framing, the heavy floors, the thick brick walls. Take the looms away and the building still held their shape, the way a riverbed holds the shape of water after the river moves. I left the building and drove to the office. Dennis was waiting. "Caleb, Lena tells me there's a discrepancy in your Harwick reports." "There is. Your field notes show failures. Your filed reports show passes." "Which is accurate?" "The field notes reflect what I observed. The filed reports have been altered." "Altered by whom?" "I don't know." Dennis leaned back in his chair. He was a careful man who had maintained his position for 16 years by understanding that most problems were simpler than they appeared, and that the simplest resolution was usually the correct one. "Is it possible you entered the data incorrectly? Checked the wrong boxes on the tablet? It's a new system. We've had input errors from other inspectors." I took a screenshot of the completed form before submission. The screenshot shows failures. The filed report shows passes. "Okay, that's a system issue. I'll have IT look at the portal. In the meantime, are the deficiencies currently corrected?" "They appear to be." "Then we document the discrepancy, have IT audit the submission pathway, and you continue the inspection. The corrections are the contractor's responsibility, and if they're done, they're done." "The contractor didn't make the corrections." Tony Valterra confirmed his crew hasn't been on site. Dennis looked at me for a long moment. "Someone made them." "Someone did. Then someone on the development team handled it without going through the GC. It's not ideal, but it's not uncommon." He straightened a pen on his desk. "Caleb, this is a high-profile project. The city wants it occupied by December. I need you to complete the inspection on schedule. If you find current deficiencies, we'll address them. If the building passes, it passes. And if my reports keep being altered, we'll have IT sort it out." That's their job. I left his office understanding that Dennis Gage was not going to help me, not because he was corrupt, but because the problem I was describing didn't fit any category he recognized, and he had a building to certify. Nadia was home when I got to the apartment. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop, and I could tell by the set of her shoulders that she'd heard something. "Tony called me," she said. "About what?" "He said you've been reporting deficiencies that don't exist, that you're calling him about work his crew didn't do. He's concerned you're going to delay the CO." "I'm not reporting deficiencies that don't exist. I'm reporting deficiencies that are being corrected overnight by someone who isn't the contractor." "That doesn't make sense." "I know it doesn't." She closed her laptop and looked at me. Nadia had a way of giving her full attention. That was one of the things I loved about her, and also one of the things that made it impossible to evade a direct question. "Show me a deficiency, right now. Something that currently fails code. Something I can see." I couldn't. Every deficiency I documented had been corrected. The building, as of my most recent visit, passed every item I'd inspected. "I can't," I said. "That's the problem. Everything I find gets fixed before I can get anyone else to see it." "Caleb, listen to yourself. You're describing a building that fixes its own code violations. Do you hear how that sounds?" "I hear exactly how it sounds." "Then what are you actually saying? That the contractor is lying? That someone's sneaking in at night? That the building is—" She stopped herself. She shook her head. "I've been on this project for 2 years. I've walked every floor. I've been in every unit. It's a good renovation. The engineering is solid. The contractor is professional. I need you to tell me that your inspection is going to reflect what the building actually is. The building currently passes. That's what my inspection reflects. Then what's the problem?" The problem was that I'd photographed a 2-inch gap in a fire separation wall, and the next morning the gap was sealed with drywall that looked like it had been there for weeks. The problem was that my filed reports were being changed to show results I didn't enter. The problem was that a smoke detector from 2011 had appeared on a mounting bracket overnight, and the building was vibrating at a frequency consistent with industrial textile machinery that hadn't operated since the 1990s. I didn't say any of this. I said, "There's no problem. I'll finish the inspection Thursday and Friday." She held my gaze for a moment, and I saw something I'd never seen directed at me before. Doubt. Not about the building, about me. We went to bed without resolving anything, which is what you do when the truth sounds insane and the lie sounds reasonable, and neither one will hold weight in the morning. Thursday, floors 4 and 5. I inspected with the focus of someone who was looking for a reason to trust the building. I wanted to find nothing wrong. I wanted every door to latch, every detector to blink, every outlet to trip, every assembly to hold. I wanted the building to be what it appeared to be, a well-executed renovation of a beautiful old structure, ready for the 42 families who'd put deposits down and hired movers and told their children about the new apartment near the river. Floors 4 passed. Every item. I checked them carefully, methodically, taking photos, making notes. Clean. Floor 5. I walked the corridor, checking doors, testing hardware, verifying egress signage. Everything in order. I entered Unit 5A, a corner unit, 2 bedrooms, tall ceilings with the exposed timber framing that gave the upper floors their distinctive character. The timber beams. Heavy, hand-hewn, original 1891 Douglas fir, the kind of structural material that doesn't exist in modern construction because the trees that produced it don't exist anymore. The renovation plans, which I'd reviewed before beginning the inspection, specified that all exposed timber in residential units would be wrapped in fire-rated gypsum board to meet the 1-hour fire separation requirement. The beams could remain visible in common areas, but in residential units, they needed to be enclosed. The beams in Unit 5A were not enclosed. They were bare wood, beautiful, aged, unmarked. The adze marks from the original construction were visible, a regular pattern of shallow scoops that gave the surface its texture. No gypsum, no wrapping, no fire rating. I checked Units 5B, 5C, and 5D. Same condition. Exposed timber, unwrapped, in every residential unit on the 5th floor. This was a significant deficiency. Not a missing smoke detector. Not a sticky door latch. This was a fire rating issue that affected every unit on the floor and would require substantial work to correct. Framing, gypsum installation, taping, finishing, painting. A week's work, minimum, for a competent crew. I documented it thoroughly. Photographs, measurements, comparison to the renovation plans. I wrote the field notes in careful detail. Then, before filing the report on my tablet, I checked the digital form. The 5th floor fire-rated assembly was already marked pass. I had not filled in this field. The entry was there, my inspector ID, a timestamp from tomorrow at 9:15 a.m., and a notation. Timber assemblies enclosed per plan specification. Fire-rated gypsum verified in all residential units, floor 5. The report was writing itself. It was filling in results for inspections I hadn't conducted, in my name, with timestamps from the future. I set the tablet on the floor and stood in Unit 5A and looked up at the bare timber and tried to understand what I was inside of. The building's systems hummed around me. The ventilation moved air through the ducts. The boiler cycled, and through the timber, through the Douglas fir beams that had held the weight of this building for 133 years. The vibration moved, deeper than mechanical, slower. The rhythm of looms, of shuttles, of a building that had spent a century full of people and purpose, and had spent the last 20 years empty. I put my hand on the beam. The wood was warm, not hot, warm. The warmth of something that had been alive recently, or something that remembered being alive, or something that wanted to be filled with the heat and noise and weight of human occupation so badly that it was generating warmth from its own structure to simulate what it missed. The building wanted people. That was the simplest, most irrational, most accurate thing I could say about what was happening. Harwick Mill was fixing itself, altering my reports, correcting its own deficiencies, and writing future inspections because it wanted to pass. It wanted the Certificate of Occupancy. It wanted to be lived in. I picked up my tablet and walked out of the building. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and looked at the 5 stories of red brick and arched windows and tried to feel afraid. I wasn't afraid. I was exhausted and confused, and sad in a way I hadn't expected. Sad for a building, which is a ridiculous thing to feel, but I felt it anyway. 100 years of purpose, 20 years of nothing, and now a chance to be full again. Of course it was fixing itself. Of course it was trying. But a building that fixes its own code violations is not a building whose safety I can certify with confidence. Because the building's motivation is occupation, not compliance. It wants people inside it. It doesn't necessarily care whether the gypsum is properly rated, or whether the smoke detector is current, or whether the fire door hardware will hold under actual fire conditions. It cares that the inspector checks the box. It's optimizing for the certificate, not for the safety the certificate is supposed to represent. Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe the building knew exactly what it was doing. Maybe the repairs were sound, the corrections were real, and the only thing unusual was the mechanism. Maybe a building that had stood for 133 years understood its own structure better than I did. I didn't know. That was the problem. I didn't know. And I was the person whose signature would determine whether 42 families slept here. Thursday night, I told Nadia I wasn't sure I could sign the certificate. We were in the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter with a glass of wine. I was sitting at the table with nothing because I'd stopped drinking during the inspection process, a self-imposed rule that felt, this week, like a punishment. "What's your basis?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, professional, the voice she used in project meetings. "The building has deficiencies that I've documented and photographed. They get corrected overnight, without contractor involvement. My filed reports are being altered to show passing results I didn't enter, and the 5th floor has exposed timber in residential units that should be wrapped per the fire-rated assembly specification. Have you confirmed the timber issue with the engineering firm? The spec may have been revised. Exposed timber is common in loft conversions when the engineer provides an alternative compliance path." She was right. It was possible. I hadn't checked with the engineer because I'd been too destabilized by the self-writing report to follow standard procedure. Nadia was doing what she always did, solving the practical problem while I was still orbiting the existential one. "I'll check tomorrow," I said. "Caleb," she set down her wine, "this project has 42 purchase agreements. Closing dates start in 3 weeks. If the CO is delayed, Caraway faces breach claims from every buyer. My name is on the project timeline. My reputation guarantees that timeline." "I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my partner is manufacturing inspection problems on my project, and I can't tell if he's doing it because he genuinely believes the building is unsafe, or because he's, I don't know, stressed or overwhelmed, or I'm not manufacturing anything." "Then show me. Come to the building with me tomorrow. Walk me through what you're seeing. If there's a real problem, I'll see it. I've been inside that building 1,000 times. I know it as well as anyone." "You know the renovation. You don't know what the building is doing to pass." She stared at me. The sentence had come out wrong, too strange, too close to the thing I couldn't say. A building doesn't anything. Buildings are passive. They receive. They contain. They don't act. Except this one did. "Caleb, I love you, and I need you to hear me when I say this. If you can't point to a current, documentable code violation that justifies withholding the CO, and you refuse to sign anyway, you will lose your position. Dennis will have you reviewed. The city won't back an inspector who fails a building that passes. And I..." She stopped. "And you?" I said. "And I won't be able to protect you from the professional consequences. And I will be the project coordinator whose partner sabotaged her certification. Do you understand what that does to me?" I understood. The building was between us now, not as a professional conflict but as a personal one. My doubt about the building was, to Nadia, doubt about her. Her career, her judgment, her project. I couldn't separate the two, and neither could she. "I'll check the timber spec tomorrow," I said. "I'll finish the inspection. If the building passes, I'll sign." She nodded. She picked up her wine. We didn't talk for the rest of the evening. Friday, day 5, final inspection. I drove to Harwick Mill at 7:30 a.m. The November morning was cold and clear, the kind of day that makes old brick glow. The building looked solid and permanent, and exactly like the kind of place 42 families would want to live. I checked with the engineering firm first. The timber specification had been revised, an alternative compliance path using sprinkler density and detection coverage in lieu of gypsum enclosure. The revision was legitimate, documented, and stamped by the engineer of record. The exposed timber on the 5th floor was code compliant. I went inside. I walked every floor, every unit, every corridor, every stairwell. I tested every door, every detector, every outlet, every window. I checked the fire suppression system, the egress lighting, the elevator, the emergency power, the ventilation. The building passed. Every item, every floor, every unit. There was not a single current deficiency I could document. The fire doors latched. The detectors blinked. The egress routes were clear. The sprinkler heads were at proper spacing. The electrical was labeled. The plumbing didn't leak. On the 5th floor, I stood in Unit 5A and looked up at the timber beams. They were bare and beautiful and code compliant per the revised specification. The adze marks caught the morning light from the arched windows. The building hummed around me, the ventilation, the boiler, and beneath them, the deeper vibration, the resonance in the wood, the memory of machinery. I put my hand on the beam, warm. The vibration moved through my palm and into my wrist, and I held it there and listened, not to the mechanical systems, to the building, to the low, patient sound of a structure that had been built to be full and had spent 20 years learning what empty meant. I took my hand away. I walked back to my truck and opened the inspection form on my tablet. Every field was complete. Every item marked pass. Some of the entries were mine. I'd filled them in during my walk. Some of them had been there when I opened the form, filled in with my inspector ID and timestamps I hadn't entered. The form was a collaboration between me and something that wanted the same result I was about to give it. I signed the Certificate of Occupancy, my digital signature, my inspector ID, my legal certification that Harwick Mill, 31 Forge Street, Portland, Maine, was safe for human habitation. 42 units, 42 families. My name on the paper that let them in. I filed the certificate and drove to the office and handed the completion paperwork to Lena. She processed it without comment. Dennis shook my hand and said the city appreciated my professionalism. I went home. Nadia was at the kitchen table when I walked in. She looked up. "I signed it," I said. The relief on her face was immediate and unconcealed. A brief, full expression that she controlled within seconds, but that I saw completely. She stood up and put her arms around me and said, "Thank you." I held her and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The building passed. I'd signed. The process was complete. The first residents moved in the week before Thanksgiving. I drove past the building that evening and saw lights in the windows. Warm, yellow, the light of table lamps and kitchen pendants, the light of people making a new place into a home. The 5th floor glowed. Someone had hung curtains in Unit 5A. Nadia came home that night and said the move-in had gone smoothly. No complaints. The residents loved the building. The brick, the timber, the height of the ceilings, the way the old windows let in the river light. One woman on the 3rd floor had told the property manager that the building felt like it had been waiting for people. She said it felt warm. "That's a nice thing to say about a building," Nadia said. "It is." We had dinner. The strain between us had eased but not disappeared. A hairline fracture in the foundation that you can fill but can't uncrack. She didn't bring up the inspection again. I didn't bring up what I'd seen. We moved past it the way couples move past things they can't discuss, carefully, with the shared understanding that some doors stay closed. A month later, I was in the records room pulling files for an unrelated inspection, a restaurant expansion on Commercial Street, when I found Janet Okoro's reassignment paperwork. It was in the Harwick Mill project folder, which I'd opened to retrieve the filed CO for my records. Janet Okoro had been the inspector assigned to Harwick Mill before me. I'd known she'd been reassigned. Dennis had mentioned it briefly when he gave me the project, but I hadn't known why. Dennis had said she'd requested it, personal reasons. The reassignment form was standard. The attached written statement was not. Janet had typed it on city letterhead, single-spaced, dated 7 months before my assignment. I am requesting reassignment from the Harwick Mill project effective immediately. Over the course of 3 inspection visits, I have documented 23 deficiencies across floors 1 through 3. All 23 deficiencies have been corrected between visits without involvement from the general contractor or any subcontractor I have been able to identify. My filed inspection reports have been altered to show passing results that do not correspond to my field observations or submitted documentation. The building, in its current condition, meets all applicable code requirements. I do not have a basis to withhold the certificate of occupancy based on current conditions. However, I do not believe the corrections were made by any person or entity involved in the renovation. I believe the building is making itself pass inspection. I cannot explain this belief in terms that would be acceptable in a professional or legal context. I can only state that my observations over 3 visits are inconsistent with any known construction or maintenance process, and that I am not willing to place my signature on the certificate of occupancy for this building. I understand that this request may result in a delay to the project timeline. I accept any professional consequences associated with the reassignment. Janet Okoro, Inspector 3. City of Portland, Department of Inspections. I read it twice. Then I closed the folder and put it back in the cabinet. Janet had seen everything I'd seen. The corrected deficiencies, the altered reports, the building that fixed itself. She had documented 23 failures across 3 visits, and all 23 had been resolved by the building without human intervention. She had refused to sign. She had put her name on a statement that said, "I believe the building is making itself pass inspection," and accepted the professional cost of that statement. She had done what I had not done. She had chosen her integrity over the certificate. And the city had reassigned her and given the project to me. The new inspector, the one without history, the one who would walk through a building that passed every code check and, after struggling and doubting and arguing with the person he loved, would sign. The building got what it wanted. It always was going to get what it wanted. If not my signature, then the next inspector's. If not theirs, then the one after that. The building could wait. It had been waiting for 20 years. It could correct every deficiency, alter every report, and present a perfect inspection to whoever walked through the door, because its patience was structural, built into the brick and timber, running through the foundation, as permanent as the building itself. I had been the path of least resistance. That was all. I went home. Nadia was in the kitchen. She was reading something on her phone and smiling slightly. One of her friends had sent a photo, or a work email had brought good news. Or she was just having a moment of private contentment in the warm light of the apartment we shared. She looked up. "Hey. Hey. Good day?" "Fine. Normal." I sat down across from her and looked at her face and felt the specific weight of a secret that I would carry for as long as the building stood. My name was on the certificate. 42 families were sleeping in a building that had passed inspection by inspecting itself. Janet Okoro had refused and been replaced. I had not refused. "The residents on 5 are hosting a holiday open house," Nadia said. "The property manager invited us. I thought it might be nice to see the building now that people are in it." "Sure," I said. "That sounds nice." We'd go. I'd walk the halls and look at the doors and the detectors and the egress signs, and I'd know that every one of them had been checked by something that wanted the building full. And I'd smile at the residents and accept a glass of wine and tell Nadia the building looked great. My name was on the paper. The building was occupied. The lights were on. I sometimes drive past Harwick Mill at night, on the way home from late service calls or errands that could have waited until morning, but that get me into the truck and onto the waterfront, where the old mill stands against the dark water. The windows glow. 42 units, 42 lives, stacked in 5 stories of brick that has stood since the year the first looms were bolted to the floor. The building is warm. The building is full. The building is, as far as anyone knows, safe. My signature says so.